Hey guys, and welcome to the show. Today we're going to talk about the Windows Unified Write filter. I don't know what that is, so I guess we'll all learn something today. Hey Jody, what's up, man?
Oh, not a whole lot, Lex. How's it going?
Pretty good. So just for the guys out there, Jody and I have known each other for a long time. When did you start at Microsoft?
I originally started in 1994 as a contractor and then full-time in 95 and been here most of the time since, minus 3.5 years working in managed services for a joint venture between Microsoft and Accenture.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah. I remember you hanging out around the old Lake Point site before we moved.
Oh, yeah. In fact, when I started, you were one of the original trainers.
Yeah, I was. That's pretty funny. Did I train your class?
Yep. We remember you jumping up on the tables.
Yeah. Playing guitar.
Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right. Well, look, man, so you're going to talk to us today about Windows 10 Unified Write filter, and I have to admit, I don't know what that is yet. So I'm looking forward to hearing your explanation of what it is and what the benefits of it are. And then I understand you've got a little demo for us.
Yes. The Unified Write filter has actually been part of Windows Embedded for a while now. And what it does is it allows you to protect your baseline image settings. So if you have users who are installing programs, it gives you a way to roll that back so they appear uninstalled, go back to your original baseline image as it was deployed without having to reinstall. And you can also protect registry settings and pretty much anything on the system. And it actually does allow you to have this running image, so to speak, where you can actually pause it to do all your patching, reinstate it for your users so they keep on going like nothing's ever happened. It's actually, it is pretty neat.
So you mentioned Windows Embedded. It's not just embedded now, right?
Right. It's now part of Windows 10 Enterprise and Education, and it is also available on Windows 10 Pro. However, there are some differences with Pro. You don't get the same management interfaces. You actually have to use a WMI provider or an outside configuration like a provisioning package from the Windows Imaging Configuration Designer.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So I understand you have a demo for us.
Oh, yeah. I always like to start off with what I call the magic trick. So let me share out. Okay, this desktop here is one that's been put together, customized. You can see a couple settings have changed, a couple applications been installed, there's a couple registry values in place, and a whole bunch of files set up here. And this is what I like to do with the Unified Write filter is actually show this as a demo first.
By the way, you're a top Windows bar guy instead of a bottom Windows bar guy.
Well, for the demo, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I just run a simple command. Now I'm going to reboot this machine.
Okay.
And I already had Unified Write filter set up before I made all these changes. So when it comes back up, it's going to look a little different.
Okay. It'll be noticeable, right?
Yes, very, very noticeable. So, whoops. Because you saw my wallpaper, how everything was enlarged a little bit, taskbar at the top of the screen.
Yeah.
Hey, look at that.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, so I like the magic trick.
And then you go in here, you'll see those applications are no longer installed. You know, see rain meter's gone, Skype is gone.
So it's almost like you instantly restored a backup.
Sort of. This actually sent me back to my original baseline before at the point where I enabled the write filter.
Okay.
So any changes that happen after the filter is enabled don't actually get written directly to the file system itself. It gets written to an overlay off on the side.
Yeah.
And that overlay can either be in memory or on disk. If you really want it to persist through multiple reboots, obviously you want to use disk. And really all I'm doing whenever I turn off that filter is dumping that overlay and going back to what's physically on the disk.
I gotcha. All right, so that's cool.
Oh, yeah. So I want to switch over here to my other VM and walk through how some of this gets configured.
Yeah. Where do we keep the overlays? Is it just in the is it just a registry key or a group of keys in the registry, or?
Actually, it's a file that's stored under the system volume information subfolder that's protected by the system, and it stores any changes that would normally get written to the disk, whether it be registry, file, even what gets stored in the blob objects or pstores.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yep. So go back, and this is my other machine here. This is actually Windows 10 Education Edition, showing you where you can actually enable this filter or enable this option. You see it right here, add remove programs, turn Windows feature on and off, right there under device lockdown. That installs it, but it does not configure it for you. You can actually use DISM, you can actually use PowerShell, the standard methods to actually install it.
Okay. To actually configure it, you mean?
Yeah, install and configure for both of those.
All right, good.
And here I'm going to use the command line tool, the UWF Manager. And you can see here, just typing it in, I get a few commands.
Yeah.
One of the things I always try to point out to people is make sure you configure it before you turn it on. Otherwise, it will protect everything, including your user files. So if you roll it back, you're going to lose all your user stored data. You can actually set exclusions saying, don't protect this particular folder, or don't protect this particular these particular registry keys if you need those to persist. So in this case, this has just been installed. It's not been configured. Use the git config option. You can see this here where it says filter state off. There's no pending commits. And that goes back to something else. If you want that overlay to actually be written to the disk, and to reinitiate a new baseline, you can actually commit those changes and then reset the overlay to start tracking new changes.
So right now, the way that it's configured right now, if somebody boots up into this box and makes a bunch of changes and then reboots, none of those changes will be saved?
Right. By default, this is going to work like a normal Windows without the right filter installed. It gets written directly to the disk. The filter's not in place, so it's not protecting you.
Right.
But I could turn this on, and I actually have it set to where it does not commit. The default settings will actually drop the overlay through the reboot, and it goes back to the baseline configuration at every reboot.
At every reboot. Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
Yep. Now I can set it
kind of like the old kiosk stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of where this started. Actually, was having kiosks where you just reset them, they come back up in the default configuration.
Well, I kind of know where it started because if you remember in Windows for Workgroups, we had, and this is very basic, but we had system.first and win.first, right? Yep. And the idea was that if somebody had to go back to a fresh install, all they had to do was rename those files, and they could get back up to a complete as installed boot. But this is 30 billion times more cool.
Oh yeah, and this actually gives you the option. I can actually tell it not to just commit the whole overlay. I can pick and choose parts of it, like commit changes to this directory, commit changes to this registry key. So it gives you a lot of control.
Yeah, this is really cool, man. I like this.
Oh yeah. And you can actually see here where my default configuration, right now it's off. I'm set to a 1 gigabyte overlay. Yeah. And it's set to use RAM. I always like to change those.
So hang on. So what is the maximum size effect? So it's set to 1 gig. Does that mean that we can only make 1 gig's worth of changes, or?
Well, what will happen is it will allow you to make up to 1 gig of changes. Then it will start giving you errors saying, this change cannot be applied because you're out of space.
Oh, okay. All right. That's good to know.
Yep. And I always like to change this up a little bit. Set it to 16 gigabytes.
Oh, yeah.
Give us lots of room. So now when I run my git config, you'll see now it didn't take my size settings. Did I do something wrong here?
It's all right.
Oh, I see why. I'm not in administrative mode command prompt. That does make a difference.
Yeah, but I'm glad you did that because that's something that people watching this podcast will probably run into.
Oh yeah,
so if you're out there watching this, he meant to do that. Not really, but it works.
So now you can see I'm actually set to disk. maximum size here. It has a default warning threshold. This is where you start getting events in the event viewer saying that the overlay is running out of space.
Yeah.
So from an administrative standpoint, you want to have something like configuration manager or operation manager collecting those events and reporting those back to you so you know which workstations to monitor.
So here's a question. You set the memory to 16 gig, but it looks like the warning threshold stayed at 512.
Yeah, you have to set that separately.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you see my critical threshold is set to 1 gigabyte as well.
Yeah.
Those are adjustable.
Okay.
So,
is there a way to get all of the commands listed out?
Yes. You can use UWF Manager /?. It'll list all the top level options.
Yeah.
And then you can go under each one and it'll show you what options you can set. Like here you can see how we can set critical threshold, set warning threshold, set pass-through.
Yeah.
And actually see what the current consumption is of the overlay. And this works with any of those top-level commands.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Now, if somebody has used this in the embedded world before, some of these commands have changed, and some of the commands from the embedded world no longer exist because of changes to the filter. In the embedded world, it was actually 2 separate filters. Here, they're combined into a single unified filter.
Right. So if somebody has a script or something that they were running on embedded, it might not work. They might have to modify it.
Right. So they just need to verify which of their old commands have translated and which have not.
Wow, that's really cool, man. I like that.
Oh yeah, it's a great little thing. I've actually set it up on my own PC. My customers wanted this for all their field deployed units, and I've also set it up on my parents' PCs. So, so it comes in real handy at times.
Cool.
So, and then to enable, it's just UWF Manager filter enable, and then we'll actually run a little script in the background. Now it just waits for a reboot, and then any changes are going to be protected. And one of the other things I also like to mention here is setting exclusions. So, and you actually set those in your filter options.
Okay. So tell me what an exclusion means.
What it means is that particular registry or file path is not going to be protected. It gets written to the disk. Like your user files, you want users to be able to keep those no matter what happens.
Right.
You can actually say, all right, don't monitor those.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. To actually set the exclusions, we use UWF Manager file, and you can see here we have the options to remove exclusions, add exclusions, get the current list, or I can tell it to commit those changes to a file or a folder using the commit command, and commit delete. And what that is if a user deletes a file, the delete gets stored in the overlay, so it's just not presented when the user browses that directory. And the commit delete actually deletes that file off the file system when that's applied.
That's cool.
Oh yeah, so you have quite a bit of control to protect the system. You can see here a couple examples of adding the exclusions for this dir2.txt, the remove the exclusion for what's stored under that particular volume by volume name. You can actually set this for at the file level. It doesn't need to be a folder. You can also set exclusions for registry settings. You can set them for, well, let's see. Yeah, just file and registry is really how it's all combined together.
So that's pretty cool, man. That means, so the write filter portion of the name essentially means that anything that's system configuration related, we will filter that and not write it physically to the registry or to the drive. We'll just store it in the file that we're creating in memory or on disk.
Correct. And this is great, especially for lab environments where you do a lot of testing, may need to roll things back very quickly. And, like we mentioned before, kiosks, deployed workstations, especially with my customer, where they actually need a very secure baseline for a lot of their operations.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. I like this.
Yep. And you will see it does require a restart before it does get enabled. And just
Even
like
initially.
Yeah.
Right, you mean initially. Yeah.
Yeah. After that first reboot, it stays enabled until you go into these other options. Now, one of the things you may have seen as we were going through these commands, there's actually something called servicing. And this actually is what allows you to pause the overlay, apply patches or configuration changes to your baseline, then resume the overlay in the background. I don't have System Center Configuration Manager set up to actually show that actually in operation, but
Yep.
that's exactly what it does. You'll actually see the machine go in. It'll say something about the UWF servicing account is logged on.
Yep.
It'll be applying updates, and then it's going to reboot and let the user log back in again.
Okay. Can you initiate that command?
Oh, yeah.
Just so that everybody sees what the command line syntax is for it. It's that simple. Yeah.
Yeah, UWF Manager Servicing Enable, and you'll see it's enabled on the next boot. Let me show you what it does here. This is where it'll normally reboot, run the script for patching, getting whatever updates, or if you're using System Center Configuration Manager, it'll actually use the agent to download and install required updates. Yeah, you actually saw that window open up. I don't know if that showed up because it's so quick, but that's where it actually paused the overlay.
Mm-hmm. It's cool.
Yep. See, this is what it does. Just says updating device. It's going out to Windows Update or your WSS server, pulling down whatever updates apply, and then when this gets done, it'll reboot and go back in.
Will it save the settings that you had applied when you applied the overlay?
Yes, it'll.
Okay.
What it does,
It'll come back to the overlaid version of the OS instead of the fresh version.
Right. Here it actually only pauses the overlay to apply updates, then re-enables it. It doesn't actually drop all the data in it.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that.
Oh yeah, this comes in real handy, especially with large environments where they need to have a large number of PCs that have the same configuration, especially like schools.
Yeah.
And in my case, various military units where they actually do training classes.
Yeah.
They just want to be able to, end of the day, reboot the box, have it set up for the next class.
Yeah, it seems perfect for that.
Oh yeah, and it's a great little feature. It's one of my favorite things to use.
Wow, this is so cool, dude. It really is.
Oh yeah.
It's probably going down and pulling down some huge update.
Well, these were fairly up to date this morning, so shouldn't be too bad. But I do have my other VM over here as well. Yeah.
I don't think we've pushed a huge update out today.
Yeah, because I actually just built and updated this whole environment this morning just for this, because I'm actually going to be doing another demo on it next week with my customer.
Yeah, this is so cool. And you can push all this out via policy?
Yeah, you can use DISM to install it, the Image Configuration Designer to push out a deployment package, a custom PowerShell script to set it up and configure it.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Let's see. So yeah, you see here, I've actually turned the filter back on. Any changes I make are now protected. You can see here, this is the UWF servicing account. It's just going to sit like this until it gets done with checking for updates. Then it'll reboot and be back to normal.
Yeah.
So that one's kind of stuck at that point.
Yeah.
So mostly because I don't have System Center Configuration Manager, it doesn't have a task sequence for updating. So it's just going to sit there and eventually time out.
Yeah.
But this does protect you in a lot of ways, like any custom apps the user installs. You can actually roll it back to before those were installed. Go back to your default apps, your default version of apps. So that's where it really helps in the lab environment, where my customer is testing a third-party user provisioning software. And what they were running into is they patched it, and it wasn't working with their particular build of Windows 10 because it hadn't been updated for the fall creators update. Yeah. So the UWF manager allowed them to roll it back to their previous instance and get those machines operational very quickly without having to redeploy all of them.
Okay, that's cool.
So yeah, it's a very simple little feature, but it's pretty powerful. A lot of people like this, so they don't have to go out and buy large third-party products to manage all this. And with ours, like anything, it's managed through our standard System Center suite of tools.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, and one of the other things was showing you the Windows Configuration Designer for how to deploy this using a provisioning package.
Yeah.
And here I'm actually using the advanced editor. And under runtime settings, you have unified write filter, where here I can actually configure the different options, whether it's filters enabled, what's the size, type, what are my exclusions for registry values, which volumes. And the default is that it will only protect the system volume where you have Windows installed. And there is one limitation. It can only protect local drives, cannot protect removable drives like USB or flash drives.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. But you can, once you configure these, you can create your provisioning package and deploy it through your standard methods.
So I have some USB connected SSDs that are not marked as removable media. Can I protect those?
Well, when you say they're not marked as removable, they show up as fixed disk?
Yeah.
Yeah, those you actually can.
So it's based on the designation that the OS gives the media.
Right. So you can actually see here where I can actually add additional volumes. But like I said, the one restriction is whether or not it shows up as a fixed disk to the operating system. And that's really it. I mean, there's actually a TechNet article. In fact, I'll actually share this link out. But this actually walks through all the UWF Manager exe commands, and I also have another document that actually shows how to deploy UWF Manager using DISM and System Center that we can actually link to.
Jody, that was cool, man. I appreciate you doing that for us.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Like I said, it's one of my favorite features to use, and I hope people take more interest in it and start using this as well.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I didn't know what it was to start with, but now that I understand it, that's, freaking crazy cool. I like it.
Oh, yeah. It actually takes place of a lot of third-party tools, and it's very simplified, very easy, and can be deployed very quickly as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned two examples of where, this would be incredibly useful. Number one is in a lab. Number two is for training classes, etc. But I don't want people to think that that's the only real, area where this is useful, because I saw you're using it on VMs. I mean, you could set up kiosks with this, all sorts of stuff.
Oh, yeah, and like I mentioned, my particular customer actually worked with a small group within the U.S. Army for how they deploy it. And they actually have environments that they actually send out in the field that whenever they come back, they don't want to spend days rebuilding 60, 70 workstations and reinstalling all their applications or having to go through making sure they can talk to their configuration manager server to redeploy images. So they actually started using this. They just stop the filter, reboot the machine, re-enable it, shut it down. It's ready to deploy in a matter of minutes.
So one thing that I wasn't 100% clear on, so I'm just going to ask you because there may be a user or two out there that wasn't either. Does it automatically reset when I reboot, or can I control that? Like, can I reboot and keep the overlays?
Yes. If you're actually set to disk, it actually persists through reboots.
Okay.
So it'll actually track all changes from the time it was enabled until you forcibly disable it or commit changes.
Okay. All right. That's cool. All right, awesome. Well, listen, man, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Glad to do it, and it's always great to catch up with you, Lex.
Yeah, man. So you need to come up with some other topics for future shows, because we've got a whole family of people that we have as regulars on the show, and so I'd love to have you in that group and see what else you can bring to the table that's cool and interesting.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I would love to present more of these and get it out there as to some of these little lesser known features that are pretty powerful.
Yeah,
So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks. I really appreciate it. And guys, that's your Taste of Premiere.